All right, so in this lecture, I want to talk to you briefly about how to go about reading these personal narratives. Over the course of the next 6 weeks, you're going to have a lot of contact with literature that perhaps you don't have tons of experience with. And these are all primary source texts that are written in a particular context. And so, as historians, it's going to be extremely helpful for you to have some sort of study guide that's alongside you as you read that will help you interact with the text. If you happen to have a print or bound copy of the text that you don't mind marking up, I would encourage you to take a pen or a pencil and use it to underline, to circle, to star, to add marginalia questions or comments in the text. If you're looking at the text via a digital function, you might also have the capacity to do that kind of marginal notation as well as a help or guide to you, especially if you plan on to do future research with this text. You will always be able to return to the text again and see your markings, and they will be helpful for you as you need to do presentation, or you need to write, or you need to interact with the text in whatever degree or level that you need to do so. So anyway, I have grouped a cluster of questions for you to ask yourself of the author, his or her historical context, questions that you might ask yourself of the text itself, and even questions that have to do with the materiality of the text or the material publication of the text as its story continued on. Because every text has a uh, ongoing story, especially if that text has a long life in publication. So I just want to go over these four clusters of questions. I'm not going to exhaustively cover them. I'm also not going to just reiterate these questions by reading them to you, but I'm going to talk about each of their subject matter in turn. First, you want to think about the identity of the author. You want to place that author in their time. You want to place them in their spot in society. Are they a woman? Are they a male? Do they come from wealthy origins? Do they come from a heathen or a uncivilized origin of some sort? How were they educated? How did they become literate? What is the quality of their literacy? Did their writing have to be vastly edited, or did they give their account and did somebody else take their account down? Was it mediated by another person? What does the text say about that person? Does it talk about them in a holistic manner where they are a person with flaws and also a person that has strong virtues that are expressed? Are they humble? Are they honest? Is their account trustworthy? Is there an agenda behind their account or their story? How are they presenting themselves? Are they making their individuality and their self consciousness known in a reliable way? Some other questions that you might ask yourself concerning the context of both the author and the text has to do with the historical period. For our sake, I'm just going to flesh out a little bit of that for you in this class. All of our texts are 17th and 18th century texts that are based in the transatlantic world, and they are British and colonial in their nature. Now, It's true that some of these texts map over into the early Republic. Sarah Osborne lived during the early Republic, and so if you are reading or doing research with her that goes later than the selections I gave you, you will get some early Republic uh, taste in her writing and some early Republic understanding about it. If you go deeper with Olodao Equiano, his life spanned the revolution in America, and though he was a British citizen when he gained Emmanuation, he is somebody who lived in a context where there was an early American republic as well. So knowing the historical context, not just knowing the quantitative 1600s, 1700s, but the qualitative way in which we talk about that period. It's an Enlightenment period. It's an evangelical period. There is an awakening that takes place. There is a revolution that takes place. There is a 7 Years' War, or what we call the French and Indian War in America. King Philip's War for the captivity of Mary Rowlandson. All of these are qualitative descriptors that describe that period, and the more you know about the Great Awakening, the more you know about New England, the more you know about Connecticut or Massachusetts, and the distinction between those two colonies, the more you know about New Haven or Boston, the more you know about the more provincial rural areas like Northampton or Providence or Newport, Rhode Island. These geographical aspects are valuable. If you just know the landscape of the frontier in New England and the rocky, mountainous, gladed terrain, the winding rivers, if you've ever traveled through Connecticut, traveled through Massachusetts, traveled through upstate New York, that will give you a greater sense of the geographical dimensions and the natural environs that many of these people lived. Uh, all of those things will help you consider like the crises that they encountered and then how they navigated those crises. Or maybe the crises that came before and kind of shaped their lives, just like how for baby boomers, World War II shaped their lives and they always think in context of World War II. Or for millennials, you have 9/11, or even for our own day and age, the COVID-19 and coronavirus. How that will shape the buying behavior, the psychology, the physiology of these characters, the way they make decisions or approach all of life. These things are important concepts to account for and to consider as we study these texts. Then also talking about the sort of text. All of these texts that we're looking at are personal narratives, but we're also going to look at correspondence literature too. And so having an idea of the conventions of what it was like to write letters and create correspondence, or the nature of journal entries and how they were used or where they were used, how they were read, when they were read, where they were read, which is one of the reasons why I had you do the Chambers reading, because the Chambers reading talks both about personal narratives and journals and correspondence literature, and also how godly reading was read and where it was read, in the bedchamber or outside in public or in the parlor or in the closet, how it was written in the closet, and what were the functions of those spaces. All of that is helpful for uh, understanding these texts and their contexts. So also things that you might ask the text concerning its genre or its literary components might include like the actual structure of the text. Did the author provide some sort of plot in their life? What were the major crises that they encountered, or the major climactic events in which they had a great conversion or a great transformation in their life? What were the outside external events taking place that might have impinged on their way of life? For Mary Rowlandson, King Philip's War, how did that shape her life? For Sarah Osborne, the Great Awakening, how did that shape and transform her life? For David Brainerd, the missionary movement, or also the revivalist aspects of the Great Awakening, how did living on the frontier with the natives shape David Brainerd's life as well? And then other things that you might want to ask of the text is like, what is the language that I don't really understand about this text? Like, what are some of the colloquial ideas? Or even, who are some of the characters that surround the author of the text and his or her associations or confidants? What are their relationship to the author or the storyline of the text as well? How did those influences shape the text in some sort of way? And then, of course, how does the text talk about its own period and its own place? Some of this contextual aspect isn't just something that you're going to pick up from reading a religious history like Edwin Gostad's or Perry Millard's Understanding the New England Mind, but it can be learned by just reading the text itself. Mary Rowlandson talks a lot about the landscape in her text. Sarah Osborne talks a lot about educating young girls as a teacher and her own socioeconomical context and how much money she has and what they possess and what they don't possess and how difficult the times are. Anne Bradstreet talks about the burning down of her home and how that was devastating for her family, or the idea of her husband or her son traveling across the Atlantic and what it was like to have an absent son or an absent husband, and how that uh, affected or impinged upon her own life. All of these things are helpful for understanding the text and its time period. If you read the Book in America reading for Wednesday's class, you will come across language like what a selectman is. And you may have been reading that text and you ask yourself, well, what's a selectman? Like, I don't even know what that is. Well, if you want to put it within our own civil society today, a selectman would be kind of like a city council member for the city council of any small town in America. Selectmen were usually taken out from the congregation of the church and they were given authority similar to the magistrate as leaders, civil leaders in the society or in the town, and they also kind of function as elders within the congregation as well. They were called the town selectmen or the meeting house. People oftentimes don't have any idea what the word meeting house means, but it was actually like the church, and also where everybody would meet for any sort of public proclamation or the reading of the law, or where the magistrate would meet to facilitate law until courthouses were built and people were married in the courthouses instead of in the meeting houses because of the strong separation of church and state. And then finally, you want to ask yourself about the text's publication. You want to learn about the actual text itself. Here's an antiquarian text right here. This is The Life of Adoniram Judson. It's a first edition text that I have. It's written by his son, Edward Judson. And in the cover, there is a picture of Adoniram Judson. Uh, it has the publication colophon on it. It has a dedication to the children of missionaries, the involuntary inheritors of their parents' sufferings and rewards. This book is affectionately dedicated by one of their number. And then asking yourself about the typography and the structure of the text itself. And then asking yourself questions about like the publication history. Who printed the text? How did it come into print? What was the layout? How many printings occurred? How many times was how many copies were made? What was it sold for? How long did it run for? All of these questions are questions you're going to ask of the text. All right.